Sharon, I count 13 people, which should be a quorum.
We have 14, so we're good.
All right, fantastic.
All righty, this is Jonathan, everyone. Good evening. I'll just go ahead and call this virtual session of our BPAC, nice Jim, and to order. And the first thing we have on our agenda is, do we have any public comment for this evening?
I believe Mr. Lamarca is here. Let me go ahead and unmute him if you want to go ahead, Mr. Lamarca.
Sure, and we'll just put 3 minutes up here for any kind of comment here, Mr. Lamarca, so go ahead when you're ready.
All right, thank you very much. Michael Marca, 33598. Just to update from last month, apparently my traffic crash went in is a civil matter only and will not show up on any of your data, which is great for the county because it even makes a bigger lie out of what they're trying to do with Fletcher Avenue. I also recall that somebody said they're okay with more accidents as long as they're less injuries. Well, I'd like you to go to the family of the person that just got hit on Boyette Road last week and had 7 hours of surgery to put his pelvis back together and say, sorry, I figured it'd be less of a severe injury that you got out of your planning. You know, we've got to take this serious, and we're failing at making bicycling safe. I don't know what more to do. I can't continue to come here and say we've got to maintain the roads, we've got to build the roads better. I can't go to the Greenways Committee and say, hey, as I seen some of y'all last night, hey, here's a 20-year-old plan. When are we going to do it? I mean, some of this stuff was brought up before my daughter was born, and now she's married and I'm fixing to have a grandkid, and I don't even know if my grandkid's going to be able to use some of these things. When are we going to start doing stuff for the people that actually cycle and walk in the communities? That's all I got to say. Thank you.
All righty, thank you, Mr. Lamarca, for your comments. We'll consider them. We are, you know, I personally am sorry that you're involved in that accident on Fletcher, and thank you very much. Okay, moving into the next part is approval of minutes from last month's meeting. Did everyone have an opportunity to read those minutes? And if you did, and does anyone have any suggested edits or changes that need to be discussed at this time? Okay, hearing none. Oh, sorry, Sally. Okay, hearing none. I think just from a point of order here, Wade, how best do we go about approval of the minutes, or just note that there's no objections to the minutes as submitted?
We can take a motion and just ask, instead of yays first, just ask if there are any objections, if that works for you.
All right, then the chair will entertain any motion for the approval of the minutes.
I move that it be approved as read or as written.
Okay, so we do have a motion, and we have a second as well by Mr. Marsh. Is there any objections to the minutes as written? Okay, hearing none, then I will just go ahead and approve the minutes as written. All right. So the next thing that we roll into here under action items is with Dr. Wong, the review state of good repair transit asset management level of travel time reliability targets.
That's a mouthful. Thank you all for having me. Good evening, Johnny Wong, MPO staff. Like the chair said in my introduction, I'm here to provide you with a status update for 3 of our federally required performance measures, which are transit asset condition, pavement and bridge condition, and system performance. Next slide, please. All 3 of these measures originate from MAP 21 and FAST Act legislation, both of which emphasize performance-based planning and accountability regarding transportation investments. The requirements found in this legislation prescribe performance measures for both DOTs and MPOs, basically requiring DOTs and MPOs to calculate these metrics and track performance over time. We first brought these metrics to you beginning back in 2016. And as many of you are familiar with, we update our safety targets annually. Some of the performance measures that originate from the safety rule are fatalities, serious injuries, fatality and serious injury rate per vehicle miles traveled. I think that that's what the invited speaker mentioned in the comment section. 2 years after we started rolling out these safety targets, we produced targets for TAM, system performance, and pavement and bridge condition. That was in 2018. Now we're at the midway point of a 4-year target period. So what I'm providing to you today is more or less a report card, like a midterm. There's no action required, or actually there's no action that we can take on the targets, but this is to inform our decision over the next 2 years about whether or not we should update them when the time is right. Next slide, please. So once again, we started this process back in 2016. We're pretty much veterans at this. We've done it several times, and we were one of the first MPOs to implement a data-informed process to create these targets, and we've been recognized by the Federal Highway Administration for our process. So once again, these targets last for 4 years. Today, what we're doing is providing an update, because what we're hoping is that the actions we have taken over the past 2 years are to generate significant progress toward achieving those targets in the next 2 years. So what we see today will be a good indication of how we're going to perform over the next 2 years. Next slide, please. So the first performance category that we have to talk about is transit asset management. Next slide. This is commonly abbreviated as TAM, T-A-M. Sorry, next slide. Wade, you just went away for a second. So TAM can be thought of more as a process. The process of managing assets involves first creating an inventory. Hart was fortunate enough to bring on a very experienced TAM program manager recently, and he's leading an initiative to inventory all assets in a shared database. So basically, bringing these into an electronic document so that they can be managed much more easily than how they used to be managed in the past. So the first step is to inventory. The second step is to assess condition by industry standard guidelines. And the third is to use that information to establish a business strategy that allows the agency to fund maintenance of these assets at the appropriate time. The goal of which being to get the most value out of that asset before it's retired. Another key concept that we should be familiar with as we talk about TAM is SGR, which stands for state of good repair. And state of good repair means that assets are performing their function, they're performing safely, and the investment in the asset has been recovered. Next slide, please. The TAM rule applies to all transit providers receiving federal funding. There's actually 2 tiers of transit agencies according to this rule. Tier 1 is, to quickly describe it, would be a large transit agency, and Hart falls into this category. Smaller transit agencies are called Tier 2. This would include the Sunshine Line and T-BARTA. So they have to produce a TAM report, but they report directly to DOT rather than us. So everything that you see in this presentation is only focusing on HART. So those transit agencies, again, are required to inventory assets. Everything that costs more than $50,000 must be included in this TAM report, and they're categorized into one of four categories that are shown on the slide in front of you. The first being rolling stock. This is passenger vehicles, including rail, bus, ferries, or any other vehicle that transports passengers. Equipment, facilities. Facilities is subdivided into two additional categories, and infrastructure. Once assets are categorized, the conditions are then rated, and again, that information is used to create a process to optimize the maintenance. Once all of this is done, HART then comes to both us and the DOT, and we coordinate with each other to establish targets that make sense for the agency. Next slide, please. All of the measures that we're required to report are defined as percent of assets not in a state of good repair. So this is a little bit counterintuitive, but we're measuring the assets that are not performing well. So here, a smaller number is obviously better. When we produced this target back in 2018, the percent of rolling stock vehicles that were not in a state of good repair was 28%. 2 years later, in 2020, that number has jumped up by almost 13%. That sounds quite high, and it is, but that's not outside the typical range for industry standard. Based on the size of HART's fleet, in order to maintain consistent performance for rolling stock age or condition, they would have to replace 16 buses annually. And it simply doesn't work out that way usually. In periods of boom, they might be able to order 30 or more buses to be replaced in a given year. During times of an economic downturn, that might be limited to just a handful. And so what you're seeing here is reflecting investment decisions that were made years ago when the buses were ordered. We would anticipate that until the backlog of needs all across HART is addressed, and until the agency has a consistent revenue stream to allow for timely bus replacements, we're probably going to see this number jump around quite a bit. And so once again, 13% is within an acceptable range for the industry, but it could be even more next year, it could be less. This is really just due to investment stream or revenue stream. Next slide, please. The second subcategory for this performance measure is equipment assets not in a state of good repair. 2 years ago, 19% of equipment was not in a state of good repair. In 2020, this number again jumped up by about 13%. That is, once again, within an acceptable range for the industry. This number actually has considerably more variation than rolling stock. These vehicles have a much shorter life cycle. It's only about 5 years. So it's much more common to see this number jump around by a large margin. A range of 20 to 25% in a given year is not unheard of. And again, that's primarily due to the age of the vehicles and lacking a consistent revenue stream. Next slide, please. The third asset category is facilities, and this one is subdivided into two subcategories. The first covers passenger and parking facilities. So these are parking lots, bus stops, bus stations. In 2018, 10% of those facilities were not in a state of good repair. The agency has made a number of investments over the past 2 years, and they brought that number up to 0, which is great. The second subcategory is administrative and maintenance facilities. Back in 2018, the number reported was 0. Now, the number reported is almost 30%. This is solely due to the heavy maintenance facility not being inventoried back in 2018. We are already aware of this issue. The heavy maintenance facility has been a topic for prioritizing funds to replace over a number of years. This particular facility has a lot of issues regarding flooding, and we anticipate that the agency is going to make that investment very soon, because as they're rolling out electric vehicles in the fleet, electric vehicles and humidity and water don't mix. So this is a problem that should be corrected in the very near future. Next slide, please. And the last asset category is infrastructure, which covers rail. This asset doesn't appear in HART's TAM plan because it's not owned by HART. The City of Tampa owns this. We reached out to the City of Tampa and they reported that 0% of the track segments have performance restrictions. Next slide, please. And of course, the MPO is doing what it can to help HART improve the condition of its assets. We've been prioritizing about $4 million a year in grant funds for bus replacements over the past 5 or more years. We've also prioritized $10 million to invest in a CAD ABL system, which is more or less bus tracking and location. We prioritized $1 million for improvements to the Marion Transit Center. And we've also talked about assisting HART in getting some funds to make those improvements to the heavy maintenance facility or replace it. Next slide, please. The second performance rule that we need to cover is pavement and bridge condition. Next slide. This performance measure applies to the national highway system, both interstate and non-interstate. In 2018, when we presented this info to the board, they agreed to support the statewide targets that the DOT set, and they're all shown on this slide for you. Our 4-year target for interstate pavement condition in good condition, interstate pavement in good condition is greater than 60%. Interstate pavements in poor condition is less than 5. Non-interstate pavement in good condition is 40 or more, and non-interstate pavement in poor condition is less than 5. For the national highway system bridges, we want to have more than 50% in good condition and less than 10% in poor condition. Next slide, please. For these 6 performance metrics, we're actually performing quite well. Back in 2018, when the MPO board set a target of greater than 60%, we were not meeting that target at the time, but we had a commitment from DOT that they would invest funds to improve the condition of its interstate pavements. And over the past 2 years, they've brought that number up by almost 10%. Interstate and non-interstate pavement condition changed only marginally. For the interstate pavement in poor condition, 2 years ago it was 0. In 2020, it went up to just 0.3%, which is insignificant. And non-interstate pavements, the condition increased by 0.1%. I would consider that nominal as well. The non-interstate pavement condition declined by almost 6%, or a little bit more than 6%. But again, we don't feel that that's anything to be alarmed about, because we have that commitment from DOT that they're going to maintain pavement in good condition. And at 36.3%, we're still hovering within striking distance of achieving that goal over the next 2 years. And toward the bottom, the last 2 columns of this spreadsheet, there are about 730 bridges in Hillsborough County. 462 of them fall on the national highway system. And the target that was set back in 2018 is to have more than 50% in good condition. We're still far exceeding that. The condition went down by 1.5%, but we're still far and away exceeding the target. And for bridges in poor condition, we're maintaining 0%, which is positive. Next slide, please. The third and final rule to cover is system performance, which is measured in terms of level of travel time reliability. I understand that that metric is not quite as digestible as the others. It's not intuitive for most people. So with my remaining time, I'll just give you a short primer before we get into the actual performance. And so to understand level of travel time reliability, I think it makes sense to break it down first to travel time reliability, or TTR. What this performance measure actually measures is the expected duration of your commute at different times of day. The federal legislation where this measure originates requires us to measure how often the network is achieving a certain level of reliability between the hours of 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. That number is really important because the number that the feds have selected is 1.5. The way to interpret a TTR score of 1.5 is as follows. So imagine your daily commute takes about 20 minutes most days. If the commute takes you 15 minutes on some days, 25 minutes on other days, that would mean that you have a very high amount of travel time reliability. There's still a little bit of variance between those times, but it's not much. On the other hand, if you have on average a 20-minute commute, but you don't know whether some days it's going to take you 5 minutes to travel that distance or 40 minutes to travel that distance, that would indicate that you have very low reliability. And so we're trying to make it so that on the worst days where traffic is the worst, your commute is only adding 50% of the travel time. Next slide, please. And if anyone has any questions about that, or if I confuse you all, please feel free to ask me questions at the end. So that's how you interpret reliability. The primary causes for low reliability are not just having congestion on the network. We know that in the morning and afternoon rush hour, traffic is always going to be terrible across Hillsborough County. But that doesn't mean that reliability is automatically low. The primary causes of low reliability are non-recurring events like breakdowns, crashes, special events, weather hazards, anything that creates an excessive amount of congestion beyond what is normally expected would be a cause for low reliability. Next slide, please. And so having said all of that, the targets that the MPO adopted back in 2018 were to have a level of travel time reliability less than 1.5, 75% of the time. The target for truck travel time reliability is measured slightly differently, but we want to have a TTTR value less than 2. What that means is trucks traveling on the network at periods of absolutely terrible congestion should expect to double their commute time or less. If they double their commute, or if they more than double their commute time, that would be an indication of unreliability for us. And on the non-interstate NHS, we want to have that LOTTR of 1.5, 50% of the time or more. Next slide, please. So when the targets were set, once again, we weren't meeting the LOTTR on the interstate. We were not meeting our target. 2 years later, we are just meeting the target. So the interstates are meeting that level of travel time reliability 75% of the time. The reliability on the non-interstate NHS back in 2018 was 59%. 2 years later, it's now 81%. And truck travel time reliability score was 2.08. 2 years later, they've knocked that down by almost 0.2%. So the performance on the interstate and non-interstate NHS is improving considerably over the past 2 years. One committee member asked me earlier in the day what to attribute that to, and I haven't been able to reach out to DOT to get an answer yet, but I'm very interested to know what secret sauce they possess that allowed them to make such dramatic improvements over such a short time. Next slide, please. We know what tools are available to us to improve low reliability. We know what tools can be implemented to reduce the impact of non-recurring congestion. The problem areas in Hillsborough County are at the bottlenecks of Malfunction Junction and SR60. And so we have a lot of projects programmed that can help improve reliability across these corridors. We have tools like integrated corridor management, which includes a lot of traffic systems management and operations type strategies, things that can be done like signal retiming, communications, and I'm looking forward to bringing a smart cities plan update to you all over the next couple of months. This is a topic area that we're really invested in because this is a low cost way of improving reliability on the network. Next slide, please. All right, once again, because we're at the midterm point, we're not going to be asking you to take action about adjusting the targets yet. This is more to inform our decision 2 years from now. There is one action that we need from you all though. Back in 2018, we accidentally reported the incorrect target for HART's equipment assets. We actually recorded it as 81% of equipment not in the state of good repair, and we should have taken the inverse of that to make it 19%. So that's just kind of like a recording error, and we'd like your action to correct that change. And that's all my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
May I put in a question
Mr.
here?
Shirk. Yep, Mr. Shirk.
That was an excellent report, Dr. Wall, but there was one word missing from that, and that word is bicycles. There are some bicycle-specific concerns vis-a-vis HART, and including bicycle parking arrangements, bicycle storage. And I was wondering if you could address that next time. Aside from that, excellent report. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Question I had, this is Jonathan. Question I had concerning the different categories of the facilities between the equipment, the road surfaces, and so on. Was there any consideration for those features for bicycle and pedestrians? That would be the sidewalks, the protected roadways and protected paths, and so on. Or is this just mainly focused on our equipment and the larger streets and so on?
I can't say for certain whether or not HART actually maintains any sidewalks. I don't believe that they do, but I'm not the one to give expert testimony to that fact. What the TAM covers is assets owned and operated by the transit agency. And so unless they're the ones who are laying the infrastructure for bike facilities, I don't think that they would be responsible for reporting the condition under the TAM rule. If there are like bike lock, I don't know what the word is, places for you to store your bike on HART property, they may be responsible for that, but that would the condition would be if that structure costs more than $50,000. I can do a little bit of digging and report back to you, but I suspect that that's why it was not reported.
I think I got it. Perhaps I was just a little confused here on during the presentation. We're talking about the state of good repair of our bridges and our pavement here, and whether or not those bicycle facilities would fall under that sort of umbrella. But I do. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, bike facilities. I don't know what the answer is as to how that's calculated. The actual criteria, or sorry, the actual methodology for assessing pavement condition is by pavement condition. I can't remember the exact term, but I don't recall bike facilities being included in that. I can double check, but I'm almost certain that that's why it was omitted. It's because it doesn't cover that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And thanks for the reminder to kind of think in the reverse here in regards to the percentages.
Of course.
I had a question about the travel time reliability.
All
Can you hear me?
Yes, if you could identify, and then we can, for the record here.
Certainly, Richard Rank from Hillsborough County. I was just wondering if the 2020 performance increased because some of the data that might have been used for travel time reliability would have happened in 2020 when the quarantine has happened and when congestion on the system has been less, and therefore your trips would be theoretically more reliable. There would be fewer collisions that could cause variation in your travel time.
Thanks for that question, Richard. I actually didn't mention that in my presentation, but there's a lag in this data. So it actually doesn't cover the year 2020. It ends at 2019. We're assessing performance up until 2020. So we'll see what happens with the next set of data that we get. I'm sure that it'll be interesting, but this wouldn't include any effects from people working at home more frequently or trips avoided because of COVID lockdown.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Wong in the presentation?
Mr. Chair, just one. Johnny, Mr. Lamarca commented in the question section that it's interesting that only 36% of non-interstate highways are in good condition. And I was wondering the same thing. What is between good and poor? What are the other categories of pavement condition?
There are several actually. I can't remember them all off the top of my head, but it's based on pavement condition index value, which ranges from 0 to 100. And with it, from good to poor, there are, I believe, at least two, what's the word I'm looking for? Quality indicators between that. A poor is, I'll have to report back to you. I can't actually remember what the PCI value is. I don't want to say something and then have to take it back at a later time. It doesn't necessarily present a safety issue. It could just mean that these are the roads that are prioritized for repavement in the near future.
Okay then. So barring any other discussion here, we have a recommended action here. So I think we will entertain a motion here to approve a correction of the TAM targets by changing the less than or equal to 81% equipment assets not in a SGR to plus or minus greater than 19% equipment assets not in an SGR.
I so move.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further conversation on the matter? Okay, then similar to the approval of the minutes here, I guess we will just register any objections to the approval of the motion.
This is Sharon. I'm sorry, who seconded that motion?
Bill Stapper.
Thank you.
All right, hearing no objections, then motion approved. Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wong, for your time this evening.
All right, thank you. I'm actually typing a response in the chat box because I was just able to look up the PCI answer. So bear with me as I type and you'll have your answer shortly.
Okay. So the next thing we want to move on the agenda here is item A, the West Shore Boulevard was removed. So next is Vision Zero corridor studies here, Wade.
Yes, and I'll just start this off, and then Lisa will be following up with the other four corridors. Excuse me. There we go. So this project was funded by the Board of County Commissioners. These are planning studies on 8 of the most dangerous corridors for all users identified in the Vision Zero action plan. Mostly here, we're looking at low-cost engineering strategies and a focus on design standards and public education. So first, the first corridor we'll talk about here is Mango Road. This goes from US 92 to Martin Luther King, and has a number of issues. You can see the picture on the left. Sand encroachment into bicycle lanes, worn paint, etc. Again, edge of pavement erosion. But looking at the crash history, we do see a high level of bike and pedestrian injuries there compared to the overall crash numbers. Well, the injuries are higher as a percentage than the overall crashes. And as you can see, those are largely distributed at the major intersections and entrances to neighborhoods there. Moving along to 15th Street, this corridor is between Fowler and Fletcher Avenue. Again, you can see some of those areas where there are cracked sidewalks, incomplete sidewalks, erosion issues, and a very high level of pedestrian fatal and severe crashes on this. These pedestrian crashes, this is one of the highest utilized corridors for HART's ADA service, and most of these pedestrian crashes appear to be happening at the bus stop locations. This next slide demonstrates that. You may be able to see that the red and yellow dots on the left line up with the blue dots in the middle picture, which are the location of the transit stops there. So looking at that, the county is already moving forward with some improvements to complete those sidewalks and create a couple of mid-block crossing locations. Moving on to Gibsonton Drive. This is a highly traveled roadway, almost 40,000 vehicles per day, give or take. It's 4 lanes, higher speed, 6 lanes in part of this corridor. Most of the crashes here are not bike and ped. They are turning movements. They are rear end crashes. But because of the higher speed and coming off the interstate and over the interstate, there's some visibility issues. So those are some of the things we'll be taking a look at here. Incidentally, every time I've been out and over the I-75 overpass on Gibsonton Road, there is somebody navigating it either on foot or on a bicycle, even though in the shoulder of the road there, and having to get across those higher speed slip ramps, etc. So, then moving on to 78th Street. This again is a 4-lane roadway with a continuous center left turn lane. A lot of driveways, a lot of access control issues here, a lot of visibility issues. If you look at the photo in the bottom middle here, there utility poles, fences, other things like that, creating visibility issues and higher speed traffic moving through there. There are, again, a lower number of crashes here, but still a number of bicycle and pedestrian crashes, and about half day, about half night. So I will go ahead and switch over presenters to Lisa, and she will continue on with the next 4 corridors. 1 second.
Okay. Saying lots of prayers. Just works. Okay. Yay. All right. Tell me what you see. Do you see Bruce B. Downs?
Sure do.
Yes.
Yay. Okay. So, and I don't recall hearing Wade mention this, but this 8 corridor analysis began in thanks to our partners at Hillsborough County. They had some budgetary money left over, and so the Board of County Commissioners said, hey, let's start tackling our top Vision Zero corridors, and these are in the top 8. Bruce B. Downs is over in the Innovation Place area and near the university, so we will partner with them to help us get our feedback on, oops. All right, okay. So this portion is from Fowler North, and it has the benefit of being completed with the same consultant that's doing some work for the county on some new signals. And so it's got a great collaboration going together. As you can see, you know, over 1,500 crashes, mostly along Fowler and Fletcher and 131st. Their rear end and side swipe and angle left turn crashes. And then we have, you know, good balance of the different types. This is the flyer we are struggling with during COVID on how to best deal with outreach in a safe manner. So we've developed this flyer highlighting the corridor to help us get the word out and direct everybody to our website to provide input in the form of customized surveys for all 8 of the corridors. Here's Fletcher Avenue, and it's going to be the extents are from Armenia Avenue to Nebraska. That's another 2-mile corridor. 4 lanes with the 2-way in the middle, the 45-mile-per-hour speed. And then we have our trips here. And then it does have a bike lane between Florida and North Boulevard. We have over 900 total crashes. And again, they're kind of balanced. The top locations being Nebraska, Florida, North Boulevard, not too surprisingly. And this dominant crash is the left turn angle. I have this is the flyer highlighting a lot of the highlights of the corridor that is kind of mentioned, and then in a little more detail. I have a video that, again, we're going to pray it works, and it's on the website as well. So this is what the community can use to help learn more about the corridor. So this is what it looks like when you go get directed to the website. You can see all 8 corridors here, you know, Wade's and mine. And so then here's, we have that fact sheet that I highlighted in the slide. And here's where they click to do the survey. And then here's a video of Fletcher. I don't believe the sound is going to work today, but the sound is only music. So I'm going to be quiet because evidently when I talk and it's playing sound, it doesn't work so well. Back. All right, and then we have Lynn Turner as our other top 8 Vision Zero high injury network, and we are studying between Ehrlich Road and Gun Highway. It's another 2 miles, another 45-mile-per-hour speed limit. You got the turn lanes, etc. Again, you're going to get a lovely little video, so I'm not going to go into too much. A little bit lower, there have been some improvements that the county has implemented recently. This one has a school along it, which is unique. So again, here's their flyer. And I think it's going to be a little less grainy if I do it at a smaller video. Okay, since it's just going to kind of hit you up with more of the corridor, and they're not radically different. I don't want to, you guys can go check it out and enjoy it since that one's very similar to the next one. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Sheldon and some more of our outreach results. Sheldon, we're studying between Waters and Hillsborough Avenue. It's got a little bit different. It's got a lot of bus stops, 27 intersections, which is where a lot of the crashes occur. It's got a different video, and unfortunately, there were 3 fatal crashes on Sheldon yesterday at Linebond Sheldon, which is just north of the extents of where we're doing our study, but very close. And so the community felt that deeply. In fact, here you see me. I got contacted by 2 of the news outlets because we had this flyer for Sheldon. I happen to live in West Chase, and so I was like, hey, we have this big, huge magazine that goes out to every single driveway in West Chase and all of the Northwest Hillsborough. There's 5,600 of these magazines that get distributed. Here's up here in the right corner is the cover of the month we were in. So we put this insert into that magazine, and it went out. So one of my neighbors had the insert, walked it over to their news desk and said, hey, you should contact the MPO. So we got interviewed about that. And then there's been all kinds of activity on the community Facebook feed, which has 8,700 members. And so there's a lot going on. And I did notice today in the update to the news, they are quoting our study. So they've obviously watched the video, which I'll show you here in a second, and they're quoting it. So hopefully they're learning more about it. And this is what the Sheldon survey or video looks like. And I remember to go directly to the video this time. Uh-oh. But I have a back doorway to do it. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm going to move it along here. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to test. Did you guys hear the sound to the videos when it was playing, or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's an improvement over the test drive earlier, so thank you very much. That one is extra long. I see now we shortened it because, you know, no citizen's going to sit through that whole thing, even though it was lovely. So now I know this was a good test drive because I realized the webmaster left the long one up there, so I will get that fixed right away. But that concludes the 8 presentations. We would love for if any of the members or anybody knows how to help us distribute we're going to have an email that comes out inviting people to do all 8 surveys. Clearly, you'll do the ones that you're most familiar with, but if BPAC members are familiar at all with any of these 8 corridors, we highly encourage you to take our survey. And then if you could forward the link and to anyone you know that might benefit from taking it as well, we would greatly appreciate it. So I can give the screen back to Wade.
Thanks, Lisa. I think I've already done it. We're happy to answer any questions you might have, but really this is just the first step, as Lisa said, and trying to get the word out. So we'd encourage you to all of the surveys are available at the web link right there, planhillsborough.org/VZ corridors. So we hope you'll take it and spread the word.
Are there any questions for Lisa or Wade on this so far? I think the videos were really nice. You know, were those drone shots then on the overheads?
Yes, Lynn Turner and Fletcher had the benefit of drone footage. The other ones were made from the field photos. And as you can see, I was along on the field tour because I made up several of the shots. So I'm like, oh no. So.
All right. Well, personally, I've already done 2 surveys, so the word's getting out there. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay. All right. If there's no other questions here, I'll just pause for a couple seconds here and make sure there's no other questions. All righty. And then our next status report here is on CV mobility and vulnerable users with Mr. Aylesworth. That I think Mr. Aylesworth joined us earlier.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yep. Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you. No, thanks, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, and also thanks to Wade Reynolds and Beth Alden, who helped coordinate this. My name is David Aylesworth. I'm a South Tampa resident. I've been here a little over 20 years. And what I want to talk about today is just some ideas for improving mobility and safety using mobile phones, and hopefully educate the committee a little bit on some technology trends that we're seeing, and also stimulate, some combination of follow-on conversations, possibly some opportunities for collaboration for trying to evolve some of these ideas. Also, I use the word phone loosely. So when I say that, think kind of any small portable battery-powered device. So we'll include wearable devices like watches, things people might wear around their neck like a lanyard or mount on a bicycle. Next slide. So CV is a company that I started last year. It's just a small Tampa-based software company. We're members of Embark Collective on lighting, and we're focused on improving travel efficiency and safety through connected vehicle technologies. And some of you I know are familiar with that, and those that aren't, I'll have a kind of a couple descriptions of things that are coming in that space. We did our first kind of a product prototype at a Georgia DOT event last November, but really got started on product development beginning of this year and launched our first product in June. And if you go to the next slide, just do kind of a quick overview of, just so you kind of have some context of what we're doing. So this app is called CV. And it's designed for drivers. And so it provides information like time to green light, countdowns, speed advisories. So it'll recommend a speed, maybe the speed limit's 40, but if you drive 30, you better arrive on green lights, which improves fuel efficiency, reduces vehicle wear. It also allows drivers to make dilemma zone decisions well in advance of getting to an intersection. It has speed limit notifications and warnings, and it also notifies drivers about high capacity special events. So think of things like concerts and stuff. Next slide. And so while our first product is designed for drivers, we spent a lot of time thinking about how to incorporate bicycle pedestrians into this ecosystem, and with 2 main goals. One, improving mobility, right, making it easier and faster to get around on bike or foot. Also encouraging the use of crosswalks, bike lanes, and signalized intersections. And then for safety, just making it safer to travel on bike or foot. And since the largest, probably the biggest risk to bicyclists and pedestrians or motor vehicles. We want to look at notifying drivers about the locations of cyclists and pedestrians, as well as notifying cyclists and pedestrians about the locations of motor vehicles. So next slide. So here I just kind of show a few categories of detection technologies that are available today. So of course we have push buttons that somebody manually activates to cross an intersection. We also have cameras, and these, vary in technology, but the newer ones do image recognition, so they can actually identify vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists at the intersection. We have radar and LiDAR. These can be either fixed or built into vehicles. And then we have smartphones. And so just kind of want to, all of these systems have pros and cons. And probably the biggest ones, for push buttons is the fact that we only see about 50% of people using them before they cross the street. Cameras can get expensive. So probably these cameras start around $10,000 an intersection and go up to $25,000. Radars, LiDARs, they can also be expensive. But in the last vehicle test that I read, which was a report by AAA, I'm sure some of you have seen, showed about 25% effectiveness. So depending on, they tested a lot of different scenarios, right turns and different speeds and different sized pedestrians, children versus adults. And across the tests, they saw like 10 to 40% effectiveness in avoiding a collision. And then for smartphones, probably the Achilles heel there is that they only get about 5-meter accuracy. So it's not enough to put a car in a lane of traffic. It's not enough to put a pedestrian on a specific sidewalk. Is he in the road? Is he on the sidewalk? And there's also latency issues with smartphones. And we'll talk a little bit about, that'll get better. And we're not talking about, for these types of applications, it's still sub-second to get information, say from a pedestrian up to the cell network and then down to a driver. But that's not enough to avoid a lot of collisions. When you look at safety and collision avoidance applications, generally the guidance is, getting it sub 100 milliseconds, if not sub 10 milliseconds, so that we can, understand that there's a potential collision, and then also have time to warn people that they might be able to avoid it. And next slide. And this is just kind of talking about some of the technology advances that are going to help the systems, the existing detection systems get better. A big one is connected vehicles. This is, I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the pilot that THEA and the city of Tampa are doing downtown. This is using dedicated spectrum in the 5.9 gigahertz band and outfitting vehicles and intersections with this technology. The idea is that vehicles will broadcast their location, speed, and heading wirelessly, and anyone else in the intersection can receive that. These technologies are also designed to support mobile phones, so the evolution of this is something that we'll see in smartphones, but probably still, I would guess a couple years away, and then perhaps much longer than that before enough of citizen smartphones have upgraded to new technology that might support this. This is kind of intersecting with 5G. So as you see 5G rollouts, most of those are targeted at fixed wireless applications like providing internet to people's homes. But you do see a couple 5G phones on the market, but there's still a lot of other infrastructure that has to happen before these problems are solved through 5G networks. So these things are practically still years away, but very promising, and I think have a very real, an important part of the solution. The next is GPS correction. So, sorry, say on this slide. Yeah, the next one, GPS correction. The idea here is to improve accuracy. A lot of the accuracy problems introduced in GPS, there's 5 or 6 things that include different atmospheric effects, as well as something called multipath, where GPS signals bounce off of buildings or other obstacles and cause interference, self-interference. And so there are solutions to this that are coming on the market. They rely generally on having fixed stations in the area, and so these have to be, geographically distributed. They're receiving the same GPS signal that your phone is, but then because they're at a fixed location, they know the error. They compare what they're calculating from the GPS signals, compare it to their own location that's known, and they broadcast that error to other devices in the area, who can then correct their own calculations with these offsets. So there's a few different technologies that support this, and this is, serves to improve GPS. Depending on which technology, probably the minimum you can get kind of sub-meter accuracy. Although these still have problems in some urban canyons, where the multipath effects are different, depending on where you are in the street, and they're difficult to correct for. And the last one that I think is very encouraging is called ultra wideband. This isn't so much a new technology as it's gotten inexpensive enough, and it has enough different applications that we're starting to see it in the first mobile phones. So both Apple and Samsung have announced this technology in their latest smartphones. The applications for this at first will be proximity detection type services. So imagine things like unlocking your car, opening your door to your house, sharing files with people that, we have a little more control over who receives it, and also playing games. But this is capable of sub 10 centimeter accuracy. But the nice thing is it's really inexpensive. And it, the anchors that so imagine it's, although the first applications are going to be two phones talking to each other, this will also support talking to devices that are mounted in an intersection. And the nice thing is these devices will probably be kind of on the $100 price range. So it's a very inexpensive way to have location reference information in an intersection that can be picked up with our phones and used to calculate our relative location to the intersection. And then we can use other technologies to broadcast that location to other people who may not have those same sensors. So again, all these things have a place, and I think these will all work together going forward. So next slide. So now I just wanted to talk to a few types of applications that these technologies that we can realize with them. So one is driver notification of bicycle and pedestrian locations, and vice versa, notifying cyclists and pedestrians of motor vehicles, but also things like smart school zones, smart work zones. And then on the transportation side, this will give us mobility data that we can do analytics on. We can better understand mobility patterns in areas. And this is something I understand there's a general lack of information on this today. So as we've talked to people about this and thought and looked at some of the existing solutions on the market, I think one of the challenges, probably the biggest one, is not so much the technology. And the technology is getting better, that we can get good accuracy and low latency communication, but it's convincing users to share this data, right? So part of this does require the system knowing where people are, and people have privacy concerns. So even assuming that it's anonymous, which it would be, and it can be, and that's the VDAC standards have solutions for that as well. But that's generally not considered enough. So it has to be free, and it has to be anonymous, and then you have to do more. Where there has to be some incentive for people to be willing to share their location. You'd think that the potential of avoiding an accident would be enough, but I don't think that's the case. I don't think we'll see that. I think the safety has to be a benefit from a system that offers other services that incentivize people. So, and that means providing somebody with information that they don't have today, or perhaps improving their their service or the experience they have today as a cyclist or a pedestrian. So if you want to go to the next slide, I have a few kind of more specific incentive ideas. One of them is just sharing signal timing information. So of course, people see at a pedestrian crosswalk, they see a countdown timer, but they're often that has to wait for some minimum cycle at the green phase, and so there might be some time they're waiting before they even see the countdown on the other street. So what we can do is we can provide information to cyclists and pedestrians on when lights are going to change. Both the vehicle signals as well as the pedestrian timers. We can also provide them the opportunity to do manual signal calls, but without having to touch the crosswalk button. So I think that's a specific concern around COVID, and it'll be interesting to see how that continues after the current health crisis is over. But I think people are resistant sometimes. I see a lot of people activating them with their elbows and things like that, where if you could touch, pull your wrist up and touch something on your watch or say something to your phone, tell it what street you want to cross, and have it activate it for you manually. The next stage will be getting into automated signal calling. So we have, basically radar-based wireless signal detectors today that just see, well, there's somebody standing at the corner. And so this would be an extension of that, because we would have a little bit more information, potentially the direction you came from, and we could infer based on what your options are to cross and whether you have a crossing signal, which direction you might be intending to cross. And the next phase beyond that is actually giving signal priority. So a cyclist or a pedestrian would get moved up in priority on certain intersections where we chose to prioritize cyclists and pedestrians over motor vehicles. And then obviously a benefit of this would be vehicle warning systems. So we can, again, notify drivers of the location. It could be as simple as notifying drivers when someone has activated or made a signal call. But also, that could evolve into more sophisticated options using sensors. And the other thing is we can fuse multiple sensors. So places where we do have either LiDAR or camera sensors, I expect because of the cost, those are going to be limited to kind of high volume or high risk intersections. But we could fuse this together, right? So this, I kind of envision a system where you have a mix of sensors and a mix of ways of sharing information with drivers and pedestrians, a combination of physical signs or lights, as well as in-vehicle or smartphone types of systems. And those mechanisms for broadcasting and sharing that information are already defined in the V2X standards, such as the ones being used in the THEA pilot. So we have mechanisms to do this already. And it's, I think it's integrating these systems together so they have the most impact, they reach the most people, because some of them are going to wait on people to buy new cars, some of them are going to wait on infrastructure upgrades as well. So next slide. And this is my last slide. Really my goal here was just to kind of start this conversation. I'd be super interested in feedback. It doesn't have to be now. If you have ideas later, my contact information is on the next slide. But I'm wondering, things like, is this interesting? What incentives do people think are adequate enough for users to be willing to share their location, even anonymously? And then lastly, if there's other ideas that you've had or things you've seen in other cities, and it's either on the services side or on the incentives side, I'd love to hear those as well. And I think, based on kind of the feedback we get, we'll, be then looking for opportunities to collaborate with agencies in the region on testing some of these ideas. So that's all I had today. Thanks for your time, and be happy to answer any questions either now or later.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ellsworth. Does anyone have any questions?
Actually, this is Wanda Vincent. I have a question.
Go ahead, Wanda.
It seems very similar to the Safe Streets app, and it looks amazing, but I noticed that it's also a subscription service, $5 a month or $2 a month. Is there any potential that it's not going to be subscription and be more widely available?
Yeah, no, thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, so one of the reasons we started with motor vehicles is as starting a new business, we have to have develop a revenue stream, and there's an opportunity with drivers to monetize, giving them more information or helping them save fuel in a case where it could potentially pay for itself. I don't view safety applications in that category. I do think this ultimately, to be successful, we have to have lots of people using it. This is a product with what we call network effects, right? So the more people we have using it, the better it is. And for that, it has to be free. So I don't envision this is something that we would charge pedestrians and cyclists for. I think it would have to be free. So then how is it funded, right? And so I think the options there are potentially by drivers. If they are provided other incentives, such as giving signal timing, then that can cover the costs of the systems. And then drivers are notified of pedestrians through today's smartphones and eventually built into their car dashboards. So no, I think it has to be free. And I think that, one of the challenges here is how to fund it. It's in general, it's not an expensive project. Even if we put up tags at the intersections to improve accuracy, this is probably like a $500 per intersection project, which is less than probably we pay to install the call buttons. So and then there's some cloud service costs potentially, but that's very inexpensive today. So this isn't something that's expensive, but it's going to require some creativity and figure out how to fund.
I've got a question. Mr. Ellsworth?
Yes.
Is there any way to use the accelerometer function in smartphones to say, for example, call for emergency services when there's a certain accelerometer signature which is consistent with being hit by a car?
Yeah, very good question. There is. I'm not very familiar. I'm familiar with how we access that information on the phone. So I know how to get that information. Mapping what we get from the phone with signatures of different types of events like falling down. I don't have a lot, but I've seen both products on the market and research papers on that topic. So I think that is an understood problem. I could envision that technology being integrated with something like this. That's a really excellent idea. I think that's very feasible in this type of product.
Thank you. A question that I have for you, Mr. Ellsworth, is from the notification perspective, how would you deal with perhaps the distraction argument that here's a approaching bicyclist or pedestrian would play out with the driver?
Yeah, thanks. Could you clarify the question? You're talking about distraction, the driver being distracted by a smartphone?
Yeah, I could see the argument being made that that the app would then distract the driver of a notification of an impending issue, which would then further aggravate the issue.
Yeah, no, that's a great. Matter of fact, I just was looking at a paper this morning on some research on kind of cognitive load in intersections, and so let me answer that in a couple ways. So one of the things that we've done is make sure that our software works without anyone looking at the screen. We certainly don't want anyone holding it. If you're looking at it while driving, it should be mounted on your dashboard somewhere within your field of view. But the notifications all work audibly, so that your phone could be in your pocket if it's paired with your Bluetooth speakers, for example, in your car. and it would give people audible notifications. Some of these problems are also being studied by the groups, the Society of Automotive Engineers and other groups working with them on this idea of V2P, vehicle to pedestrian communications. And so there will there's also advice from USDOT on how to provide information to drivers that minimizes, cognitive load, things that can be glanced at that don't require a lot of reading. So yeah, definitely all issues that I'm very sensitive to and have to be thought about. Initially, my thought is, let's because we have to before we get to actual collision avoidance, it's possible that doesn't happen, isn't fully realized until we have autonomous cars that are making these decisions for us. All right, so they're detecting some, near collision and are applying brakes or whatever that, whatever their tools are that they can leverage. Until then, though, we can still provide information about, say, a cyclist that's coming down a road that's obstructed by a building on a corner. That stuff we can, or the fact that a pedestrian has pressed the call activation and maybe stepping out into the road. So I think we start with things that are safe. But yeah, that's definitely an area that the industry has to make sure we're not doing more harm than good here.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions for Mr. Aylesworth? All righty then. Well, thank you very much for your time again. Or did someone have something?
No, that's just me saying thank you. And
okay.
Yeah, I'd love to have any follow-up conversations if anyone is interested. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, moving on through our agenda, old business and new business. Is there any new business to talk about or old business?
I do have one item, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
And that is Corporal Pramberger will be rotating off of the BPAC, and I know we thank him for his time on the committee, and he will be replaced. I apologize, I don't have the person's name in front of me.
All right. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Paul, your audio is coming through very rough. Sorry about that, Paul. Your audio is not coming through for some reason. But again, thank you. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of him.
Yes, thank you very much. I do have some new business here. For those that are members of the Florida Bicycle Association, this month's or this quarter's newsletter announced the Volunteer of the Year, Mr. Jim Shirk. If I put my audio, it's in there, so well done, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, I think we were supposed to have a presentation pre-COVID before that, so we thought it was appropriate to recognize you for your service there.
I'm often recognized, never by the right people, though.
Well, alrighty then. And then does anyone else have any new business at all to bring up? I do have one other thing here, just for those, just as a record here. Cutter and Bike Walk Tampa Bay have put together a interesting. They've revisited their ride with their mayor here in Temple Terrace, and there is a little 3.5 mile route that is self-driven, self-ridden, or you can even self-run it if you'd like. Clearly marked starting at the rec center on White Way, and if you complete it, you can go inside the rec center, sign that you completed it, and there's a T-shirt or blinky lights available for you saying that you rode with the mayor in March of 2020. So I invite you all to do that. It is a very nice shirt this year. And then So if there's no other new business, I do have something to bring up on old business here, if I may. We have had a lot of conversation over the past month, dating probably over, close to a year, concerning street maintenance, specifically as to the street sweeping and the debris removal. Historically, we've learned that it has been route-based versus need-based, and requests for the information to those relative departments, I don't think have been honored by those departments, and it is increasingly getting frustrating to not only myself, but perhaps some on the committee, as well as some of the public. I personally believe that the committee is willing and able to partner with these departments and in an effort to find some sort of solutions and improve the overall experience in the area. And once again, I'm asking for the assistance that we can do this. And just to kind of give you a rolling example here, through my weekend riding, I was riding through a neighborhood that historically is very clean in regards to road debris, and I come across the street sweeper that is cleaning the streets. Yet I go 3 blocks over and I have to avoid broken glass, all sorts of bottles and plastic debris in the bicycle lane, and I'm riding on a regular roadway with 45-mile-an-hour speed limit, which is very, very upsetting. So that's what I was bringing up on the old business. I thought I'd mention it.
And thank you for that, Jonathan. And I'll reach out again to the heads of the departments and just sort of see if we can get a response on both schedules and need versus just how those are prioritized.
Yes, and I think the message is, and if I'm out of line, please, folks, correct me, but I think we're looking to partner and provide input based on our experiences rather than criticize and tell these folks how to do their jobs. That's not the intent. It's simply just to partner and make it a better experience for everybody. Okay. With that, is there any other old business for folks to consider? All righty. Well, then I think the next thing we have on our agenda is adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
We have a motion. Second. All righty then. Well, thank you very much, folks, for your time. And we'll, oh, did we want to mention, I'm sorry, before we do that, we want to mention the Tri-County.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, the Tri-County BPAC is being hosted by Pinellas, but virtually. It is next Tuesday at 5:30. So I will, I'll be sure to send an email tomorrow with the link to that for everybody.
We sure it's 5:30 or maybe 4?
Excuse me, let me just open my calendar.
Calling you to task here.
You are absolutely correct. It is 4.
All righty then. Thank you very much for checking. Okay. All right, that with everything, have a good night, everyone, and it was good to see you. Thank you very much, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Yes.